Hey guys, I'm just picking up on the last video. I'm going to try to get all the way up, hopefully finish the PowerPoint, but we only have about 15 minutes. 43. Alright, so this is where the last one stops, and it's talking about Somalia and the institutionalization of the Somalian government. It's a very weak institution. Now it would probably be considered a little bit more middle because it's been quote unquote stable since about 2011. But overall, when you look at the coup d'etats, when you look at how the government was a parliamentary democracy in the 50s, and then that ruler got killed on the tarmac, and then it's just been slowly coup d'etat after revolution, after democratic attempt, after coup d'etat. It's basically been a constant um, government overhaul. And not only is it just government, the state's always been the same. The size of Nigeria always been the same, but it's both a government change and a regime change. So the institutionalization of that state is pretty weak. Okay, the sovereignty of the Nigerian state is pretty low. Um, they needed a joint coalition of African nations. What was it called? It was C Coalition of African States, all determined to help defeat Boko Haram in the northeast. So it's a very, very weak state. So that would mean that they have both low autonomy and low capacity. Now, mineral capacity, they are pretty high. That's where we get a lot of our minerals for all of our technological devices, our iPhones, iMacs, all that jazz. You know, tungsten, all those cobalt type mineral properties that the Nigerian state has. Same with oil. And if you haven't checked, this morning oil prices are taking a massive tank. That's the morning of 4/21, if you're paying attention. Um, so going with sovereignty, we want to think about the three ways that a state is formed, and we went over this a little bit in our hangout yesterday, and we have another one coming up in about an hour. Kona is wondering why I'm talking to myself, but the three different ways is you want to see economic development. Okay, that's rulers who create laws, regulations, and infrastructure that permits and respects private property. All right. Without that, you're not going to have an economic incentive to develop. Without economic incentive or economic boom, then you're not going to have taxes to create. Um, Without taxes, you're not going to be able to pay for those roads, those food inspectors, health inspectors, police, fire department, all those municipalities. So you need an economic development for the first part. Next, you have technological innovations. So when a technological innovation is harnessed, specifically Silicon Valley, a couple of other areas, you're going to see a massive return on that, right? If you look at California, specifically near Silicon Valley, what once was the cheapest real estate imaginable is now one of the most expensive real estates, and that's the same with San Francisco. And just as you look at, when the United States went west, the more technological innovations, the better the situation of the people. Okay, and the last one is domestic stability. For people's ability to travel more freely within their country and encourages interaction. And this is kind of how the European Union formed, all three of these combined in one. If you're a European Union citizen, you don't need to carry your passport on you at all times. You can get to and from without really needing any type of connection, any type of um, papers on you outside of your European citizenship card. Now that's changing for if you're a United Kingdom citizen. That'll be the only little bit of a difference. Okay, two paths of political organization. You have consensus and you have coercion. Consensus, we're all banding together. Coercion, you're all brought together by a ruler. Now, what does it mean for a state to have legitimacy? Okay, states provide security. There's a reciprocal responsibility to the states by the citizens. So the states are going to provide you security, and you, the citizens, are going to provide the state some type of currency, some type of initially work or military service. Now it is our taxes. So people recognize and accept something as right and proper as long as it is not being abusive to an extent. Now, government abuses are rampant depending upon any government. It's just what level does societal pressure really allow or curb to whatever government abuses are? When you look at the United States during the Civil War, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. When you look at Russia currently under Putin or Russia under the USSR, you weren't allowed to speak of democratic ideals. You weren't even allowed to have a Beatles record. You were going to get arrested. If you look at China, there's certain terms and phrases that you're not allowed to use. Winnie the Pooh being one that is banned. Their social media sites are all banned. Um, so each individual state is going to provide security under their own definition. The United States, where we have the Bill of Rights, we have those first 10 amendments that give us a lot of protections. And I was talking about this a little bit yesterday in terms of freedom of speech and what is hate speech. That's something that's built into, not hate speech specifically, but the freedom of speech is built into our U.S. Constitution, is our U.S. Bill of Rights. So as the states are providing some type of security, we're providing some type of responsibility to them that they must keep us secure. Otherwise, the state is insolvent, it's a failed state, and we're not going to stay there. We're not going to spend money there. Okay, so rules, regulations, societal norms, and customs can gain some type of traditional legitimacy. Remember, there's traditional legitimacy, charismatic legitimacy, and rational legal legitimacy. Okay, one of the traditional legitimacies that I put in is a temple in India that was known to have immense amount of wealth, where the Indian populace used to kind of tithe. They used to donate their value and their wealth into these different vaults, and the majority of the vaults haven't been opened um, until some of them haven't been open to this day, and some of them have been open recently, as in 2011. Okay, so that's something that the British people, when they were ruling over the Indian state, knew not really to touch, because that was going to incite the Indian population to riot. That would affect the charismatic legitimacy of the British state. That would affect the traditional legitimacy of their right to rule over the Indian population, and the population of India would then revolt and have a little bit of, a coup d'état, or try to take back their country. All right. So the three basic forms are traditional, charismatic, and rational legal. So traditional, really simple, built by habit and custom over time, stressing history. Very strongly institutionalized. This is the United Kingdom under the Queen, the royal family. This is North Korea under Kim Jong-un, which news reports as recently as yesterday and this morning have stated that Kim Jong-un might have actually gone under surgery and had negative outcome to that surgery. So he's possibly in a coma right now, and his sister might be taking control of power. But I'll keep you updated on that. You had this with Cuba under Fidel and Raul Castro. You have this currently under Xi Jinping. More, not necessarily specifically on him, but just the authoritarian leader of the state. That goes all the way back to Mao Zedong, the 1920s, 1930s. Next, you have charismatic legitimacy, and this is again just how a couple of these categories, they all fit multiple states. Charismatic legitimacy is built on the force of ideas and the presence of a leader. So weakly institutionalized, because typically when this does not work, or when that leader or charismatic leader dies or is overthrown, that's the end of that idea, that's the end of that regime, and that's the end of that government structure in some instances. So I give you Fidel Castro and Raul Castro of Cuba. Kim Il Sung of North Korea creates the Kim dynasty. Now we're down on to Kim Jong Un, and then his sister, and I don't want to slaughter her name, so I'll update you that when we get into our Google Hangout a little bit later. And then finally, you have rational legal legitimacy. Very strongly institutionalized. This is built on rules, procedures, and the offices that create and enforce them. So this is where all of the states would really fall under. The European Union has rational legal. The Chinese state now has rational legal because they do have a constitution. The United Kingdom has rational legal, all built off of the Magna Carta. Russia has a constitution in 1993. 1991 was when they had the revolution. So there's rational legal legitimacy in all of the states that we've studied. Same with the other two. It's just, where can you really fit the tabs? Where can you fit the right saying, and the right person into charismatic, or the right ideas into traditional. Okay. Um, so then you have democracy versus authoritarianism. So democracy is the principle that a state should be governed by law and not arbitrary decisions made by an individual government officials. This is why in a democratic state you have the right to protest, the right to assembly. Now, obviously, right now during the coronavirus, you don't have that right to assembly unless you're socially distant, but you do have that ability. The factors that indicate the degree of democracy or authoritarianisms includes the extent that the state adheres to the rule of law. The degree that a state can control or influence the media is also the second part. When you look at a state that we know is very heavily controlled by the government, the media specifically, is the Russian Federation and the Chinese state. So you know both of these government agencies have a strong influence over what their media says, what they can and cannot report on, and really the facts that they are reporting on in general, which is kind of scary. The degree and practice of free and fair elections. Without a free and fair election, you have nothing to look forward to in terms of some type of hope as a voter. You don't have the ability of, well, I can change this, because of the problems of a, you don't really trust the election. You don't trust that it's occurring. Then you have the nature of transparency. Now, transparency is really important. Within our United States, we have the president has the executive agreements power. Now, typically, he has to release all executive agreements, barring some confidentiality or classified statements towards the end of each year. But you do have to kind of get a general gist of, well, why did this happen? What is the purpose behind this happening? In some of these other states, you don't have any of that option. You don't have any of that ability. You're talking about states that can do whatever they want. When Vladimir Putin took control over the manufacturing production of the Russian state, I showed you the clip in class. There was really no transparency to that. He could just do whatever he wants. So you really want to look at, well, am I in a democratic state? How much can I really find out about my government? Am I in an authoritarian state? So on and so forth. And then the nature of citizen participation in government. When you look at the ways up, the United Kingdom, you're elected into the member of the House of Parliament, you become a member of Parliament. The European Union, you become a member of the European Parliament. Nigeria, you can be elected. Mexico, you can be elected. Iran, you have to be approved. And that's where it starts to get a little scary, right? Iran, you have to be approved to run for the Majlis. Russia, you have to run under one of the four parties, but that goes back to the transparency of, are you really allowed to run? And then China, you have to run for your local small branch, and then you have to go up through approval of that parallel hierarchy system by the Chinese government. So the branches of a national government in a democratic regime are likely to be independent. Independence can serve to prevent one branch from controlling all governmental powers, which is what's happening in Iran, which is what's happening in Russia, and a little Russia and China. Okay, Nigeria, yes and no to an extent. Same with Mexico to an extent. Mexico is having a problem just controlling their own state, not necessarily all the branches of governments. All right, so authoritarian regimes. We got about 3 or 4 minutes now. Illiberal democracies is a government system in which, although elections take place, citizens are cut off. So that's Russia. One party states, one political party has the right to form, usually based on the existing constitution. All the other parties are outlawed or only allowed to take a limited control. That is China with the Chinese Communist Party. That was USSR with the Communist Party under Lenin. That is the current Russian Federation, sort of, under the United Russian Party, even though there is the guise of other Russian states or other Russian parties. Theocracy is a system of government in which priests rule in the name of God or God. That is Iran. That's Vatican City. That's a couple other really, really small states. Totalitarian, North Korean state, China, Iraq, at one point under Saddam Hussein, Cuba under Fidel Castro, the Philippines under Duterte, Brunei, the Micronesian nation of Brunei, I forget the ruler there. That's a totalitarian state. So there's a lot of these. And then military governments are countries under direct rule of the military and its leaders. So you can make the argument that Russia is, you can make the argument that China is.